Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. What if I told you that the reason women don't fully respect you has nothing to do with your looks, your money, or how much effort you put in, and everything to do with how you carry yourself when no one is watching? Most men try harder, they talk more, they explain themselves, they seek approval, and without realizing it, they quietly give away the very thing that creates respect. You've probably felt this before. The more you try to impress, the less seriously you're taken. The more available you are, the less valued you feel. It's frustrating, confusing, and it makes you question what you're doing wrong. But the Stoics figured this out centuries ago. They understood a silent psychology of respect, one rooted in self-control, emotional discipline, and unshakable inner authority. No chasing, no convincing, no effort wasted. In this video, I'll share 10 Stoic secrets that make women naturally respect you, not because you demand it, but because your presence commands it. Watch this video till the very end, because the final secret ties everything together. And once you understand it, the way you move, speak, and show up will never be the same again. Number 1. Emotional self-control in every situation. Emotional self-control is not about suppression, stiffness, or pretending you don't feel anything. It's about sovereignty. It's about you remaining the author of your responses no matter what the moment throws at you. When you master this, something subtle but undeniable happens. Your presence becomes heavier, calmer, and more trustworthy. You stop leaking energy. You stop broadcasting insecurity. You move through situations with a quiet steadiness that doesn't need explanation. And that steadiness is what earns respect without effort. The Stoics never aim to eliminate emotion. They aim to govern it. That distinction matters. You feel anger, interest, disappointment, curiosity, but those emotions don't grab the steering wheel. They report information and you decide what to do with it. This is why Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Reaction is automatic. Response is chosen. Emotional self-control lives in that space between stimulus and response. And once you learn to inhabit it, your entire way of relating to others changes. Most men lose respect not because they feel emotions, but because their emotions spill out unchecked. Tone shifts, energy spikes, words rush forward. There's a subtle urgency to be understood, validated, or corrected. Emotional self-control removes that urgency. You stop needing to resolve everything immediately. You stop letting momentary feelings dictate permanent impressions. You become slower to react and faster to recover. That combination is rare, and rarity is powerful. When you hold your emotional center, you communicate strength without asserting it. There's no need to raise your voice, defend your position, or prove your intent. You don't argue with reality. You don't chase clarity when ambiguity appears. You remain composed, and that composure tells the truth for you. Wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." In modern terms, that means refusing to let external behavior drag you into internal chaos. You stay yourself. You stay steady. That alone separates you. Emotional self-control also signals self-trust. When you don't overreact, you show that you believe you can handle whatever comes next. There's no panic beneath the surface. No scrambling for footing. You're rooted. That rooting creates safety, not because you reassure, but because you're predictable in the right way. Your emotional baseline doesn't swing wildly. People instinctively respect those who are hard to destabilize. This kind of control is built, not declared. You don't announce it. You practice it quietly. You practice it when something irritates you and you choose silence over impulse. You practice it when something excites you and you choose restraint over excess. You practice it when something disappoints you and you choose dignity over display. None of this makes you cold. It makes you deliberate. And deliberateness is attractive because it implies depth. A crucial Stoic insight is that emotions are judgments, not commands. You feel what you think. When you change how you interpret events, your emotional experience shifts automatically. Seneca put it plainly, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Emotional self-control begins with questioning your interpretations. Is this moment truly urgent? Is this reaction necessary? Is this feeling asking for action or simply awareness? When you slow down enough to ask those questions, you regain authorship over yourself. One practical exercise is emotional labeling. When a feeling arises, name it internally without judgment. Not to analyze it endlessly, but to create distance. The moment you name it, you're no longer inside it, you're observing it. That shift alone reduces its intensity. From there, you choose how to move. This trains you to experience emotion without becoming emotion. Another powerful practice is controlled breathing paired with posture awareness. Emotion lives in the body before it reaches the mouth. Shoulders tighten, breathing shortens, jaw clenches. When you consciously relax your body and slow your breath, you interrupt the emotional cascade. This isn't avoidance, it's mastery. You're telling your nervous system that you're safe, grounded, and in control. You also strengthen emotional self-control by delaying expression, not suppressing but postponing. You don't need to say everything the moment you feel it. Let emotions settle before they speak through you. This delay transforms raw feeling into measured communication. Over time, people begin to sense that when you do speak, it matters. You're not reactive noise, you're signal. There's also the discipline of outcome independence. Emotional volatility often comes from attachment to how things should go. When you loosen that attachment, you loosen the grip of emotion. You act with intention, not expectation. You show up fully, but you don't cling to results. That posture creates calm, because your emotional state is no longer held hostage by outcomes you can't control. What makes this truly powerful is that emotional self-control compounds. Each moment you hold yourself with composure builds internal evidence that you are reliable to yourself. Confidence grows quietly from that evidence. Not bravado, not dominance, just a grounded certainty that you can handle pressure without collapsing or exploding. This is why respect appears without effort. You're not trying to manage perceptions. You're managing yourself. You're not seeking approval. You're maintaining alignment. And alignment is felt instantly, even if it's never verbalized. So start small, but start deliberately. Pause before reacting. Breathe before speaking. Question your interpretations. Train your body to stay relaxed under emotional load. Let feelings pass through you without commandeering you. Do this consistently, and emotional self-control becomes your default state, not a tactic, not a performance, but a way of being. When you reach that point, your presence speaks before your words ever do. Calm replaces chaos. Precision replaces impulse. And respect follows naturally, because nothing commands respect more quietly or more powerfully than a man who governs himself. Number 2. Unshakable inner calm under pressure. Unshakable inner calm under pressure isn't something you perform for the outside world. It's something you cultivate in private, and others simply feel it when you walk into a moment that would normally unsettle most people. You don't announce it. You don't explain it. You don't defend it. You just carry yourself as someone who is not internally negotiable. That kind of calm doesn't come from confidence tricks or rehearsed lines. It comes from alignment. From knowing, deep down, that no external tension has authority over your inner state unless you grant it permission. The Stoics were obsessed with this idea for a reason. They understood that pressure is inevitable but disturbance is optional. Wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Read that slowly. Pressure doesn't shake you. Your interpretation does. Inner calm is not the absence of intensity. It's the presence of clarity inside intensity. Most men believe calm arrives once life becomes easier. Stoicism flips that completely. Calm is not the reward for avoiding difficulty. Calm is the weapon you carry into difficulty. When pressure rises, most people speed up internally. Their thoughts scatter. Their emotions rush forward, desperate to resolve tension as quickly as possible. You learn to do the opposite. You slow down inside. You widen your awareness. You breathe. You choose. That pause, that microscopic gap between stimulus and response, is where respect is born. Epictetus put it bluntly, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Unshakable calm is not passivity, it is mastery. You still act, you still speak, you still decide, but your nervous system is not hijacked by urgency. You are not pushed into proving, defending, or fixing yourself in the moment. You are anchored, and anchoring is rare. When you develop this calm, something subtle but powerful happens. You stop broadcasting need through microreactions. You stop signaling insecurity through rushed explanations. You stop leaking tension through your body language. Pressure no longer pulls you out of yourself. It reveals you. And what it reveals is steadiness. That steadiness communicates emotional authority without a single word. This is why unshakable calm earns respect without effort. You are no longer trying to manage perception. You are managing your inner world. Everything else adjusts naturally. People sense when someone is internally centered because it creates contrast. Most minds are noisy, reactive, hungry for relief. A calm mind feels like open space. It doesn't chase. It doesn't cling. It doesn't collapse under uncertainty. It simply remains present. Seneca warned, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Pressure is not your enemy. It is the training ground for your calm. Every moment of internal tension is an invitation to strengthen your composure instead of escaping it. You don't need to eliminate discomfort. You need to outgrow your reflex to be ruled by it. Unshakable calm begins with one discipline: radical ownership of your internal state. You stop blaming circumstances for how you feel. You stop waiting for external reassurance to settle your nerves. You recognize that your breath, your posture, your focus are always available tools. When pressure rises, you return to the body. Slow the breath. Drop the shoulders. Unclench the jaw. These are not trivial adjustments. They are signals to your nervous system that you are safe enough to remain composed. Another habit is mental subtraction. Under pressure, the mind loves to add stories, projections, imagined outcomes. Calm comes from removing excess interpretation. Ask yourself, what is actually happening right now without narrative? Not what it means, not where it might lead, just what is. This brings you back into the present where control exists. Reminded himself, confine yourself to the present. That single practice dissolves a surprising amount of inner chaos. You also train calm by delaying emotional expression, not suppressing it but postponing it. Pressure often tempts you to react immediately, to release tension outward. Instead, you let the emotion pass through without acting on it. You observe it like weather. This builds internal resilience. You learn, through repetition, that emotions rise and fall whether you indulge them or not. That realization alone weakens their grip on you. A powerful Stoic exercise is voluntary discomfort, not to punish yourself but to expand your tolerance. You intentionally place yourself in situations where the ego wants relief, reassurance, or control, and you practice staying relaxed inside them. Not rigid, relaxed. Calm is not tight self-control, it is loose strength. Think of a deep-rooted tree in strong wind. It doesn't fight the wind, it absorbs it. Another exercise is negative visualization, used correctly. You briefly imagine loss, rejection, uncertainty, not to dwell in fear but to strip these outcomes of their terror. When you face them mentally, they lose their power to ambush you emotionally. Seneca advised, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." When pressure arrives, it feels familiar, not shocking. What changes as you practice this is your relationship with intensity. You stop seeing pressure as something that threatens your identity. It becomes something that sharpens it. Your reactions slow. Your presence deepens. You become less predictable in the best way because you are no longer governed by impulse. That unpredictability, grounded in calm, commands respect effortlessly. And here's the final truth most men overlook. Inner calm is deeply attractive because it signals self-trust. You don't need to control the moment because you trust yourself to handle whatever unfolds. You don't rush to stabilize uncertainty because uncertainty doesn't destabilize you. That trust is felt. It's reassuring. It's rare. So start today quietly. Train your breath. Train your attention. Train your pause. Let pressure arrive and stay with yourself instead of escaping outward. Each time you remain calm where you once reacted, you reinforce a new identity. One that doesn't need effort to be respected. One that simply is. Number 3. Absolute independence from validation. Absolute independence from validation is not something you announce. It's something people feel the moment you enter a space. It's the quiet signal that you are not here to be approved of, ranked, judged, or emotionally fed. You are here because you chose to be, and that distinction changes everything about how you're perceived. When you no longer look outward for confirmation, your energy settles. Your movements slow. Your words become deliberate instead of defensive. You stop performing and you start being. That shift alone creates respect without effort. Most people live on a feedback loop they barely notice. A glance, a tone change, a delay, a response, or lack of one immediately triggers interpretation. Am I liked? Did I say the right thing? Should I adjust? That internal noise is exhausting, and worse, it makes you predictable. Validation dependence trains you to chase signals instead of lead yourself. The Stoics warned against this long ago. Epictetus said, "If you want to be invincible, make sure that no one can hurt you by their opinion." That sentence isn't poetic comfort. It's a practical instruction. The moment someone else's approval becomes unnecessary, their influence over you dissolves. Absolute independence from validation doesn't mean you reject appreciation or close yourself off. It means appreciation doesn't move your center, praise doesn't inflate you, disinterest doesn't deflate you. You remain internally level, and that emotional self-sufficiency is rare. Most people are reactive. They rise and fall based on external cues. When you don't, your presence feels grounded, almost immovable. That steadiness is what people interpret as confidence, even if they can't explain why. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Seeking validation is often invisible to the person doing it, but obvious to everyone else. It shows up in over-explaining, in softening your boundaries, in saying things you don't fully stand behind just to maintain harmony, in adjusting your identity depending on who's watching. Independence from validation cuts all of that out. You speak when you have something to say. You stop talking when you don't. You don't rush to fill silence or justify yourself. Silence becomes neutral, not threatening, and neutrality, when it's calm, carries authority. Wrote, "I do my duty. Other things do not trouble me." That's validation independence in its form. You focus on what's yours to manage, your actions, your standards, your conduct, and you let everything else exist without interference. This mindset removes the subtle desperation that weakens most interactions. You're not trying to secure a reaction. You're not waiting for permission to be yourself. You're already decided. What makes this powerful is that validation independence creates asymmetry. Not superiority, but asymmetry. When you don't need external confirmation, the emotional weight shifts. You're not leaning forward energetically. You're not seeking. You're allowing. And allowance is often mistaken for strength because it signals abundance. Abundance of self-trust, of options, of internal approval. You don't need to prove your value because you're not questioning it. This is also why validation independence feels uncomfortable at first. You've been conditioned to measure yourself through response. Detaching from that can feel like standing without mirrors, but this discomfort is where growth happens. Seneca wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Validation dependence is a form of emotional slavery. Independence is the slow reclaiming of authority over your inner state. To build this independence, you must first notice how often you seek permission emotionally, not verbally but internally. Pay attention to the micro moments where you wait for a reaction to decide how you feel. The instant you notice this, pause. Don't correct it aggressively. Just observe. Awareness weakens the habit. Over time, that pause becomes space, and space gives you choice. One powerful exercise is intentional self-approval. At the end of each day, ask yourself one simple question. Did I act in alignment with my values today? Not did I get praise. Not did things go my way. Alignment only. If the answer is yes, let that be enough. This trains your nervous system to associate worth with integrity rather than response. Over time, your body stops craving external validation because it's being internally supplied. Another practice is controlled restraint. Choose moments where you could seek reassurance and consciously don't, not out of pride but as training. Let uncertainty exist without resolving it immediately. Let silence breathe. Let people interpret you however they choose. This builds emotional muscle. You learn that nothing collapses when you don't chase clarity or approval. In fact, things often stabilize on their own. There's also a deeper Stoic layer to this, accepting that you will not be understood by everyone and releasing the need to be. Reminded himself, "I was born to work with others." Notice he didn't say to be liked by others. Cooperation doesn't require validation. Respect doesn't require explanation. When you internalize this, you stop trying to manage perceptions. You let your character speak over time. Validation independence sharpens your boundaries naturally. You don't need to announce them or defend them emotionally. You simply don't cross lines you don't respect. And when boundaries are calm instead of reactive, they're taken seriously. You don't negotiate your standards every time someone pushes. You don't bend just to keep connection alive. You trust that what aligns will remain, and what doesn't can leave without damage to your identity. The paradox is this: the less you seek validation, the more freely it's offered. Not because you engineered it, but because you're no longer draining interactions with need. You're present, you're stable, you're internally sourced. That combination feels safe and solid. People sense that you're not asking them to hold you up emotionally, and that alone generates respect. Absolute independence from validation is not a destination you arrive at once. It's a daily discipline. 1,000 small choices to stand inward instead of outward, to approve of yourself before anyone else has the chance, to anchor your worth in conduct, not applause. As Epictetus said, "Seek not the good in external things, seek it in yourselves." Take that seriously. Practice it. Live it. And you'll notice something subtle but profound. The world responds differently when it realizes you don't need its permission to stand tall. Number 4, clear boundaries without explanation. Clear boundaries without explanation are one of the most quietly powerful signals you can project, and most people never learn how to embody them. They either over-explain, apologize, justify, or soften their edges until the boundary collapses. Stoicism teaches the opposite, not through aggression, not through control, but through clarity. When you set a boundary and don't explain it, you're not being rude, you're being rooted. You're saying, "This is where I stand," without asking anyone to agree, approve, or understand. That posture alone changes how you're perceived. You've been conditioned to believe that boundaries must come with reasons, that if you don't explain yourself, you're being unfair or cold. But explanations often come from insecurity, not kindness. They are an attempt to manage how you're perceived. The Stoics saw this clearly. Epictetus said, "If you want to be invincible, make sure that no one can ever compel you to do anything against your will." Notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say convince. He doesn't say persuade. He says compel. Clear boundaries remove compulsion entirely. They end negotiations before they begin. When you explain your boundaries, you invite debate. You turn a decision into a discussion. And the moment it becomes a discussion, you've subtly signaled that your internal authority is negotiable. High-value men don't do this because they don't need to. Their boundaries are not emotional reactions. They are pre-decided standards. Calm, firm, unmoving. That steadiness is felt instantly. Here's the deeper truth most people miss. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They're about controlling yourself. Wrote, "You can commit injustice by doing nothing. When you tolerate what violates your values, when you stay silent to avoid discomfort, when you explain yourself into exhaustion, you're slowly eroding your self-respect." Clear boundaries without explanation reverse that erosion. They restore internal alignment. And alignment is what people respond to, even if they can't articulate why. You don't need to announce your boundaries dramatically. You don't need speeches or ultimatums. You simply stop participating in what doesn't align with you. You disengage without resentment. You redirect without guilt. You choose silence over overclarification. This is not passive, it's disciplined. Seneca warned, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." The same applies to men who are endlessly accommodating. When you stand for everything, you stand for nothing. Boundaries give your presence shape. There is a particular calm that comes from knowing you don't owe explanations for your standards. That calm changes your energy. Your words become fewer but heavier. Your decisions become cleaner. You stop scanning for approval after you say no. You stop rehearsing justifications in your head. You let your actions speak and your silence reinforce them. This is not detachment from people. It's attachment to principle. What creates respect is not the boundary itself, but how little emotional noise surrounds it. No anger, no pleading, no defensiveness, just quiet certainty. That certainty communicates self-trust, and self-trust is contagious. People sense when you are not trying to convince them of your worth. They sense when your no is final, not because you're rigid, but because you're clear. Stoicism emphasizes the idea of living according to nature, your nature, not the expectations imposed on you. Reminded himself, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Clear boundaries without explanation are an expression of that philosophy. You don't argue, you don't persuade, you simply act in accordance with who you've decided to be. This does require courage. There will be moments when silence feels uncomfortable, moments when you want to soften the edge to make sure you're liked, to reassure others that you're still good. But the Stoics would tell you that virtue does not require applause. If your boundary is aligned with your values, that's enough. External reactions are not your responsibility. A powerful exercise to build this habit is boundary pre-commitment. Sit quietly and define for yourself what you tolerate and what you don't. Not in dramatic terms, in calm, precise language. Write it down, internalize it. Once a boundary is pre-decided, you no longer need to improvise explanations in the moment. You simply act. This removes emotional hesitation and replaces it with grounded response. Another exercise is explanation fasting. Choose periods where you intentionally stop explaining your decisions unless absolutely necessary. Not to be dismissive, but to observe your own discomfort. Notice how often the urge to explain comes from fear of being misunderstood or disliked. Each time you resist that urge, you strengthen your internal authority. You learn that clarity does not require commentary. You can also train this through language economy. Shorten your responses. Remove emotional padding, not coldly but cleanly. Let your tone stay calm. Let your posture stay relaxed. practiced reminding himself, "Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved." Your boundary is the rock. Explanations are the waves. The paradox is that the less you explain, the more seriously you're taken. Not because others are intimidated, but because they sense you are not seeking permission. You are not asking to be respected. You are behaving in a way that makes respect inevitable. This is what "without effort" truly means. The effort was internal. The outward result looks effortless. Clear boundaries without explanation do not push people away. They filter. They remove confusion. They create a clean emotional environment where respect can exist naturally. You're not trying to manage reactions. You're managing alignment. And alignment is attractive because it's rare. The Stoics never promised comfort. They promised freedom. Freedom from emotional dependence. Freedom from external validation. Freedom from living. When you stop explaining your boundaries, you step into that freedom. You move through interactions lighter, steadier, more grounded. You don't chase understanding. You embody clarity. So take this seriously. Not as a tactic, but as a discipline. Decide who you are. Decide what you allow. Then let your actions, your silence, and your calm do the rest. You don't need to convince anyone. Stand where you stand. Hold the line without tension. And watch how respect begins to form around you, not because you demanded it, but because you no longer negotiated with yourself. Number 5. Silence instead of reactive speech. Silence, when chosen deliberately, is one of the most powerful forms of self-command you can practice. Not the awkward kind, not the resentful kind, but the grounded, intentional silence that comes from not being internally provoked. Most people speak because they feel pushed to speak. You speak because you choose to. That difference is felt immediately. It signals that your emotions don't drag you around by the collar. It tells the world that you are not ruled by impulse, urgency, or the need to explain yourself. And that calm restraint is quietly commanding. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology gave it language. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." That wasn't advice about politeness. It was instruction in power. Reactive speech gives away control. It reveals where you're sensitive. Silence, on the other hand, keeps your center intact. When you don't rush to respond, you're saying, "I decide what deserves my energy." That alone shifts how you're perceived. Most men are conditioned to believe that fast responses equal confidence. They think clarity requires immediacy, but reaction is not confidence. Reaction is exposure. When words spill out before thought settles, you hand over your emotional position. Silence pauses that transaction. It buys you space. And space is where strength lives. You don't need to fill every gap with sound. You don't need to correct, defend, or justify in real time. You can let moments breathe. You can let meaning rise instead of forcing it. Wrote, "Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break. It stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it." Reactive speech is the wave. Silence is the cliff. One crashes and disperses. The other remains unmoved. When you internalize this, you stop feeling threatened by tension or uncertainty. You no longer treat every moment as a test you must pass verbally. You allow yourself to be still, knowing that stillness often communicates more than words ever could. There's a subtle respect that emerges when you don't chase the last word, when you don't rush to clarify how you're perceived, when you don't jump in to soothe discomfort that isn't yours to manage. Silence in those moments doesn't create distance, it creates gravity. It makes people lean in mentally. It forces them to fill the gap with their own interpretation, and that interpretation is often more favorable than anything you could have said. This doesn't mean withdrawing emotionally or becoming cold. Stoic silence is not avoidance, it's discernment. You speak when your words add value, not when your emotions demand release. You pause not because you're unsure, but because you're sure enough to wait. That restraint reads as maturity. It tells others that you trust yourself to handle ambiguity without scrambling. Seneca warned, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Reactive speech is often a loss of mastery. It's the reflex to discharge emotion outward instead of containing it inward. Silence reverses that flow. It keeps the emotional circuit closed. You feel what you feel, but you don't leak it. You hold it, observe it, and decide what deserves expression. That decision-making process is where respect is born. To adopt this habit, you must first let go of the fear that silence will be misread. It often will be, and that's okay. You don't need to manage every interpretation. You don't need to be instantly understood. Calm men are not in a hurry to be decoded. They let time do the work. They trust that consistency will speak louder than clarification. A practical exercise is the deliberate pause. Anytime you feel the urge to respond quickly, insert a silent count of 3. Not to appear strategic, but to reconnect with yourself. Ask internally, am I about to speak from clarity or from reflex? If it's reflex, wait. Let the urge pass. You'll notice something important. Most impulses dissolve when they're not immediately obeyed. Another practice is emotional containment. When you feel triggered, don't suppress it and don't express it. Just hold it. Feel it fully without narration. This trains you to experience intensity without needing to perform it. Over time, your nervous system learns that it doesn't need to broadcast emotion to survive it. This inner steadiness is sensed long before it's understood. You can also train silence by reducing unnecessary explanation. Notice how often you add extra words to justify simple statements. Start removing those additions. Say less, but say it cleanly. Precision carries authority. Over-explanation carries insecurity. The fewer words you need, the more weight each one holds. Silence also sharpens your awareness. When you're not busy preparing your response, you notice tone shifts, packing, energy changes. You become present instead of performative. That presence changes how interactions unfold. You're no longer reacting to what's said, you're responding to what's happening beneath the words. This is where Stoic silence becomes transformative. You're no longer trying to steer perception through speech. You're allowing your composure to do the work. You become someone whose reactions are not predictable, not because you're erratic, but because you're not automatic. And people instinctively respect what they can't push around emotionally. The goal isn't to be quiet all the time. The goal is to be sovereign over your voice, to speak from intention, not impulse, to let silence be a choice, not a gap you rush to close. When you do this consistently, your words gain density. Your presence gains calm authority, and you stop needing to assert strength because your restraint already shows it. Begin today. Practice one pause, one reaction, one moment where you let silence stand without filling it. Over time, that silence becomes not empty but full of self-control, full of confidence, full of quiet strength. And that kind of strength never needs to announce itself. Number 6, purpose placed above pleasure. Purpose placed above pleasure is one of those ideas that sounds simple until you actually try to live it. Then you realize how radical it is. Almost everything around you is quietly urging the opposite: comfort first, ease first, gratification now. The Stoics saw this centuries ago and warned that a life arranged around pleasure becomes fragile, reactive, and easily controlled. A life arranged around purpose becomes solid, quiet, hard to shake, and that solidity is felt long before it is explained. When you place purpose above pleasure, you stop negotiating with every impulse. You're no longer asking what feels good right now. You're asking what aligns with who I've decided to become. That shift alone changes how you move through the world. You begin to act with direction instead of drift. You make choices that are anchored, not convenient, and people can sense that immediately. Not because you announce it, but because your energy is no longer scattered. Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? That question is a blade. It cuts away excess. It trims indulgence. It exposes how often pleasure disguises itself as reward when it's really avoidance. Purpose doesn't mean denying enjoyment or becoming rigid. It means enjoyment is no longer the steering wheel. You are. And when you're steering, you don't rush. You don't swerve. You don't abandon direction for momentary comfort. Respect grows in environments where discipline exists. Not loud discipline, not performative discipline, quiet discipline, the kind that doesn't need applause. When you consistently choose purpose, you signal that your life has a center. You're not pulled in 10 directions by mood, craving, or distraction. You don't need constant stimulation to feel alive. That self-containment creates a sense of gravity. People trust what has gravity. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." That's purpose in its form. Decide first. Then endure whatever friction follows. Pleasure avoids friction. Purpose accepts it. Purpose understands that discomfort is not a sign of failure. It's often a sign of alignment. When you stop treating discomfort as an enemy, you gain an inner steadiness that doesn't depend on circumstances cooperating. What most people never realize is that pleasure-seeking creates subtle dependency. You start organizing your actions around what gives you relief, validation, or stimulation. Over time, that makes you predictable. And predictability born from craving is weakness. Purpose-driven action does the opposite. It makes you reliable but not needy, focused but not rigid. You don't chase highs and you don't collapse when things feel flat. You continue. Seneca warned, "It is not the man who has too little but the man who craves more that is poor." Craving is the engine of pleasure-first living. Purpose interrupts that engine. It tells you that enough exists in direction, not indulgence. You begin to feel rich in momentum rather than sensation. That kind of richness doesn't fluctuate wildly. It's steady, and steadiness is deeply reassuring to be around. Living this way doesn't require grand gestures. It requires consistent restraint. Small, repeated acts of choosing what matters over what tempts. Every time you resist the urge to escape into comfort, you reinforce your self-respect. Every time you follow through when it would be easier not to, you deepen trust with yourself. And self-trust is the foundation of all external respect. Without it, confidence is noise. One powerful practice is intention setting at the start of your day. Not a to-do list, a priority of identity. Ask yourself, what quality am I practicing today? Discipline, patience, courage, presence. Then let pleasure be secondary, not banned, just secondary. When enjoyment arrives, you receive it without clinging. When it doesn't, you don't feel deprived. You continue moving forward. Another exercise is voluntary discomfort. The Stoics deliberately practiced mild hardship to loosen pleasure's grip, not as punishment but as training. You can do the same. Choose moments where you intentionally do what is slightly uncomfortable but meaningful. Sit with boredom instead of escaping it. Delay gratification instead of rushing toward it. Notice how little actually breaks when you don't indulge every impulse. That realization is liberating. You can also reflect each evening, as did, asking yourself where you acted in alignment and where you surrendered to ease. No judgment, just awareness. Awareness sharpens choice. Over time, you begin to feel the difference between actions that drain you and actions that strengthen you. Pleasure often leaves you softer afterward. Purpose leaves you clearer. Purpose above pleasure also changes how you relate to time. Pleasure lives in immediacy. Purpose stretches across days, months, years. When your decisions are future-facing, you stop demanding that every moment entertain you. Silence becomes tolerable. Stillness becomes useful. You're not restless for stimulation because you're oriented toward something larger than the moment. This orientation communicates maturity without a word. You don't rush to fill gaps. You don't overextend for approval. You don't abandon your direction for short-term reward. Your life has structure, and structure creates safety. Seneca put it simply, no man is free who is not master of himself. Purpose is self-mastery in motion. Choosing purpose doesn't make life dull, it makes it meaningful. Pleasure enjoyed after effort tastes cleaner. Rest earned through discipline feels deeper. But even when pleasure is absent, your sense of worth remains intact. That is the core signal. You are not animated by craving. You are animated by intention. If you take one thing from this, let it be this. Stop asking what feels good today and start asking what strengthens you tomorrow. Repeat that question until it becomes instinct. Align your actions with it. Let pleasure follow, not lead. And as you build a life guided by purpose, you'll notice something quietly powerful happening. Your presence will begin to carry weight, your words will land without force, and respect will arise naturally, without effort, because you have chosen direction over distraction. Number 7. Consistency between words and actions. Consistency between your words and your actions is quieter than charisma, subtler than confidence, and far more powerful than either. It's the kind of strength that doesn't announce itself, yet it's always noticed. You feel it before you can explain it. And once you understand how deeply this principle works, you stop trying to convince anyone of who you are. You simply live it. That alignment does the speaking for you. Most people talk more than they live. Promises come easily. Intentions sound impressive. Plans feel noble in the mouth, but inconsistency leaks energy, it creates friction. Even when someone can't articulate what feels off, they sense it. When your words drift away from your behavior, trust erodes quietly, not dramatically, not all at once. It just thins out. Stoicism saw this long ago. Epictetus warned, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. That sentence alone could dismantle half of the noise men make trying to be respected. When your words and actions match, you become predictable in the best possible way. Not boring, reliable. Not rigid, rooted. There's a deep calm that forms when you don't have to remember who you claim to be because your behavior keeps track for you. You're no longer performing identity. You're expressing it. And that expression creates a sense of safety and gravity around you. People trust what doesn't fluctuate wildly. You don't need to say you're disciplined if your actions already reflect restraint. You don't need to declare your standards if your behavior enforces them quietly. You don't need to promise change if your habits already show direction. Wrote, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Consistency is exactly that, removing the gap between declaration and execution. When there's no gap, there's no confusion. And where there's no confusion, respect grows naturally. What weakens men is not failure but contradiction. Saying one thing and doing another fractures your internal authority. Each time you break alignment, even in small ways, you train yourself to distrust your own word. That internal distrust always shows up externally. You hesitate. You over-explain. You compensate with intensity or charm. Consistency removes the need for all of that. When you trust yourself, you move with fewer words and firmer steps. This is why Stoicism places so much emphasis on integrity of character rather than outcomes. Seneca said, "He is most powerful who has himself in his own power." Having yourself in your own power means your word is not decorative, it's directional. When you say something, it carries weight, not because it's dramatic, but because it's dependable. Over time, people stop testing you. They stop pushing boundaries. They stop looking for cracks. Not because you demanded respect, but because your alignment made disrespect feel pointless. Consistency also removes emotional volatility. When your actions follow your values instead of your moods, you become steady. You don't say things you'll later retract. You don't commit out of impulse and withdraw out of discomfort. You move deliberately. That deliberateness communicates maturity. It signals that you're not governed by fleeting emotion, but by principle. And principle is rare. Rare things are respected. Many men try to shortcut this by sounding decisive without being disciplined. They speak firmly, but live loosely. That mismatch is always detected. Strength isn't in the firmness of your tone, it's in the follow-through of your behavior. You don't need to assert dominance when your consistency already establishes authority. You don't need to insist on trust when your actions quietly earn it. The Stoics believe that character is built in private long before it's recognized in public. Reminded himself daily, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. That rule alone can reshape how you move through the world. Before you speak, you measure truth. Before you act, you measure alignment. Over time, that filter becomes automatic. You speak less but with more impact. You act more but with less noise. To train this, start with ruthless self-honesty, not judgment, clarity. Pay attention to the small promises you make to yourself, the quiet intentions, the internal commitments no one else hears. Each time you follow through, you strengthen your self-respect. Each time you don't, you weaken it. Consistency isn't built in grand gestures. It's built in repeated alignment at the smallest levels. A powerful exercise is word reduction. For 1 week, deliberately say less about what you plan to do, improve, or become. Replace explanation with execution. Let action take the place of narrative. Notice how your energy shifts when you stop broadcasting intention and start embodying it. There's a groundedness that emerges when your life speaks for you. Another practice is delayed speech. When you feel the urge to promise, declare, or impress, pause. Ask yourself, am I prepared to live this sentence? If the answer is uncertain, stay silent. Silence, when chosen consciously, protects your integrity. Over time, you'll notice that when you do speak, people listen differently. Not because you're louder, but because your words arrive with a track record. You can also train consistency by anchoring to values instead of outcomes. Choose a few principles that matter deeply to you: discipline, honesty, restraint, self-respect, and let your actions orbit them daily. Not occasionally, daily. Stoicism teaches that virtue is not situational, it's stable. When your behavior reflects stable values, your presence becomes solid. You no longer sway with approval or resistance. Consistency between words and actions creates a quiet authority that cannot be faked or rushed. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes the humility to let go of image and commit to substance. But once established, it works effortlessly. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to convince. You don't need to chase respect. It follows alignment naturally. This is the invitation Stoicism offers you. Become someone whose word is simply an extension of his behavior. Someone who doesn't need to signal strength because his life already reflects it. Start small. Stay steady. Tighten the gap between what you say and what you do until there is no gap left. When that happens, respect stops being something you seek and becomes something you carry. Number 8. Comfort with walking away. Comfort with walking away is one of those quiet strengths that doesn't announce itself, yet it changes the entire emotional atmosphere around you. You feel it first, long before anyone else does. It begins the moment you stop gripping outcomes so tightly. The moment you realize that staying is a choice, not a necessity. And when staying is a choice, leaving becomes power, not as a threat, not as a tactic, but as a calm, settled truth inside you. Most people fear walking away because they confuse it with loss. Loss of connection, loss of validation, loss of possibility, but the Stoics never saw it that way. To them, clinging was the real loss. Epictetus put it plainly: if you want to be invincible, make yourself independent of things you cannot control. Walking away is not rejection of others. It's refusal to abandon yourself. And that refusal creates a kind of gravity. You stop leaning forward emotionally. You stop bargaining with your own standards. You stand where you are, and you let the world meet you there, or not. When you are comfortable with walking away, your energy changes. You are no longer negotiating your worth in silence. You are no longer tolerating what drains you just to keep something alive. You become selective without becoming rigid, calm without becoming distant. This balance is rare, and rarity commands respect. Not because you demand it, but because your presence signals that you value your time, your attention, and your inner order more than fleeting approval. Reminded himself, never let the future disturb you. You will meet it if you have to with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. Comfort with walking away is rooted in that same confidence. You trust yourself to handle what comes next. You don't need guarantees. You don't need reassurance that staying is the right move. You know that whatever unfolds, you will remain intact. That self-trust is felt immediately, even if it's never spoken. What makes this so powerful is that it removes desperation from the equation. Desperation is not always loud. Often, it's subtle. It shows up as overinvestment, over-explaining, overstaying. It shows up when you ignore the quiet signals inside you telling you something is off. Walking away comfortably, calmly, cuts that pattern at the root. You stop trying to be chosen because you have already chosen yourself. This is not about being cold, it's about being clean internally. When you are willing to leave situations that erode your self-respect, you stop accumulating emotional residue. You don't carry resentment, you don't rehearse conversations in your head. You don't shrink yourself to maintain proximity. You simply step back into alignment. Seneca wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Walking away is an act of mastery. It says, I decide where my energy goes. There's a deep psychological shift that happens here. When you know you can walk away, you stop trying to control. You listen more. You speak less but with more precision. You don't rush to secure certainty. You allow ambiguity without anxiety, and paradoxically, this makes your presence feel safer, not riskier, because you're not trying to trap anything. You're not trying to extract reassurance. You are there by choice, and that choice can be withdrawn without drama. To build this comfort, you must first loosen your attachment to outcomes, not by pretending you don't care, but by accepting impermanence. The Stoics were relentless about this truth. Everything changes, everything passes, said, loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight. When you internalize that, walking away no longer feels like failure. It feels like cooperation with reality. A simple daily practice is to rehearse non-attachment mentally. Before entering any interaction, remind yourself quietly, I am here because I want to be, not because I need to be. Say it slowly. Feel it. This isn't an affirmation for confidence. It's a grounding statement for clarity. It helps you notice the moment you start compromising yourself for comfort. And when you notice it, you can choose differently. Another exercise is boundary rehearsal. Sit with yourself and define in writing or thought what you will not trade away for connection. Not rules for others, standards for yourself. When those standards are crossed internally, walking away becomes simpler. Not easier emotionally, but cleaner. You don't debate. You don't justify. You act in alignment. Over time, this builds an unshakable calm because your actions and values stop contradicting each other. You can also train comfort with walking away through voluntary restraint. Choose moments where you could push, pursue, or insist, and don't. Let the urge pass. Notice that nothing collapses. The world doesn't end. Your worth doesn't diminish. This teaches your nervous system that absence of control is survivable, even healthy. Each time you resist chasing, you strengthen your ability to choose yourself without fear. There is a quiet dignity in this posture. You don't announce your boundaries, you embody them. You don't threaten to leave. You simply know that you can. And that knowing settles into your body. Your shoulders drop, your breathing slows, your voice steadies. This is not performative strength, it's lived composure. Seneca warned, a man who is a slave to his passions is the most abject of slaves. Fear of walking away is often fear of being alone with yourself. But once you face that fear, it loses its grip. You realize that solitude is not emptiness, it's stability. And from that stability, connection becomes a choice, not a lifeline. Respect grows in the presence of someone who doesn't cling, not because they are distant, but because they are whole. Comfort with walking away signals that you are not trying to extract meaning from someone else. You already have it. You are simply sharing space, not filling a void. So train this, slowly, deliberately, without theatrics. Each day ask yourself where you are staying out of fear rather than choice. Each day practice letting go of outcomes, of control, of the need to be needed. And notice what replaces that tension. Calm, clarity, self-respect. When you are truly comfortable with walking away, you paradoxically stay more present when you choose to stay. You're not guarding yourself. You're not calculating exits. You are there fully because you want to be. And that presence, free of fear, free of grasping, is what earns respect without effort. Number 9. Respect for yourself before anyone else. Respect for yourself before anyone else is not a slogan, it's a stance. It's the quiet line you draw inside yourself that says, "This is who I am and I won't bargain with that." Everything else grows from there. Without that inner line, respect from the outside is unstable. It comes and goes. It's conditional. But when self-respect is established first, respect from others arrives almost as a side effect, not something you chase or negotiate for. The Stoics were relentless about this. Epictetus said, "If you want to be respected by others, the great thing is to respect yourself." That line isn't poetic encouragement, it's instruction. Self-respect isn't about thinking highly of yourself. It's about refusing to abandon yourself. It's about aligning your actions with your values even when it's inconvenient, uncomfortable, or unnoticed. Especially then. Most men are taught to look outward first. Am I liked? Am I approved of? Am I accepted? That outward orientation slowly erodes self-respect because it trains you to adjust your standards based on reactions. You soften your boundaries. You explain yourself too much. You tolerate what quietly drains you. Over time, you may not even notice it happening, but your internal posture shifts from "I choose" to "I hope." And hope, when it's tied to validation, is fragile. Self-respect flips the direction. You become inwardly anchored. You don't ask, "How will this be received?" Before you ask, "Is this aligned with who I am?" That order matters more than almost anything else. When your internal compass leads, your behavior becomes clean, not perfect, clean, fewer contradictions, less self-betrayal, less resentment. You stop doing things you later have to justify to yourself. Reminded himself, never value the admiration of someone who cannot admire themselves. But there's an unspoken mirror in that quote. Never seek admiration by doing what makes you lose admiration for yourself. The moment you notice that quiet inner wince, when you know you acted against your own standard, that's self-respect asking for your attention. Ignore it too often and you stop trusting yourself. Honor it, and you build a kind of internal authority that others can feel. Here's the part that changes how you move. Self-respect simplifies your decisions. When you know what you will and won't tolerate, you stop negotiating with every situation. You don't need elaborate rules. You don't need rehearsed lines. You just know. That knowing shows up as calm certainty. You're less reactive, less defensive, less eager to explain. And that calm isn't performative, it's structural. It comes from internal consistency. This is why self-respect creates effortlessness. When you respect yourself, you don't chase outcomes that require you to shrink, bend, or posture. You don't overextend to prove value. You don't rush to secure approval. You allow things to unfold while remaining rooted in your standards. That rootedness is rare, and rarity is noticed. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." Self-respect requires bravery because it often means choosing internal peace over external reassurance. It means being willing to disappoint, to be misunderstood, to be unspectacular in moments where ego wants applause. But that bravery creates freedom. You're no longer trapped in the loop of managing impressions. You're free to be present, direct, and unforced. Self-respect also sharpens your boundaries without turning you rigid. Boundaries born from fear are loud. Boundaries born from self-respect are quiet. You don't need to announce them constantly. You enforce them through consistency, through what you engage with and what you calmly let pass, through where you invest energy and where you don't. Over time, this consistency trains others how to treat you without you ever needing to demand it. Now let's make this practical, because self-respect is built through action, not reflection alone. Start with a daily alignment check. At the end of the day, ask yourself one question only. Did I act in a way that I respect today? Not did things go well, not was I liked, just that. If the answer is no, don't spiral. Note it. Adjust tomorrow. Self-respect grows through honest self-assessment without self-punishment. Next, practice delayed response. When you feel the impulse to immediately explain, justify, or seek reassurance, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself whether speaking is an expression of truth or a request for validation. If it's the second, let silence do the work. Silence chosen from self-respect is not awkward. It's grounded. It teaches you that you don't disappear when you don't perform. Another exercise is value-based decision rehearsal. Before situations that usually pull you off-center, remind yourself of one non-negotiable value. Not 10. 1. Carry it into the moment. Let it guide your tone, your pace, your choices. This trains you to act from principle rather than pressure. Also, pay attention to energy leaks. Self-respect often increases not by adding behaviors, but by removing tolerations. Notice where you feel subtly drained, diminished, or internally resistant. That resistance is information. It's not asking you to react dramatically. It's asking you to choose differently next time. Respecting yourself means listening to that signal. As this becomes habitual, something important shifts. You stop trying to be impressive. You stop trying to be harmless. You simply aim to be aligned. And alignment is felt. It communicates steadiness, maturity, and self-trust without words. This is the Stoic secret most people overlook. Respect from others mirrors the respect you demonstrate toward yourself, not the respect you ask for. When you live as someone who won't abandon his values for comfort, attention, or approval, you don't need to demand respect. You embody it. So bring it back to this again and again. Respect yourself first, in small decisions, in quiet moments, in choices no one applauds. That's where the real work is. That's where the calm authority forms. And once it's there, everything else, how you're perceived, how you're treated, begins to reorganize around it effortlessly. Number 10, mastery over impulses, not people. Mastery over impulses, not people, is one of those truths that sounds simple until you actually try to live it. Most men are taught subtly or loudly that strength is about control. Control the situation, control the outcome, control how others feel, respond, or stay. But Stoicism flips that entire idea on its head. Real strength, the kind that earns respect without effort, doesn't reach outward. It turns inward. It asks one quiet but demanding question: can you govern yourself? When you begin to master your impulses, something fundamental changes in how you move through the world. You stop being dragged around by urges, reactions, and emotional spikes. You no longer need to dominate a room, persuade anyone, or force a connection. You become solid, and solidity is unmistakable. Epictetus said it plainly: no man is free who is not master of himself. That sentence alone can become a lifelong practice. Freedom doesn't come from getting what you want. It comes from not being enslaved by wanting. Impulse is the enemy of presence. The urge to speak too quickly, to explain yourself when no explanation is needed, to chase reassurance, to react emotionally instead of responding deliberately. These impulses leak information about your inner state. They signal urgency, hunger, and restlessness. Not because you're weak, but because you haven't yet learned to pause. Mastery begins in that pause, a single breath where you choose restraint instead of release. Over time, that restraint becomes composure. And composure is rare. Stoicism never asks you to suppress your feelings. It asks you to observe them without obedience. Wrote, "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you." That line is about impulse control at its core. The feeling arises, but you decide whether it gets a vote. Most people feel and immediately act. You feel and then choose. That gap, small but intentional, is where respect is born. Here, what many men misunderstand: trying to control people is always a sign of inner chaos. The more someone needs to manage reactions, outcomes, or perceptions, the more unstable they are inside. Mastery over impulses removes that need entirely. When you're calm within yourself, you don't need to steer others. You don't need to impress. You don't need to win. You're already steady, and that steadiness makes manipulation unnecessary. Seneca warned, "He is most powerful who has power over himself." Power over yourself means you don't chase stimulation to escape boredom. You don't chase approval to escape doubt. You don't chase intensity to escape stillness. You can sit with discomfort without immediately trying to change it. That ability is felt instantly, even if no one can articulate why. It shows up in your tone, your packing, your silence, your refusal to be rushed emotionally. Impulse mastery also reshapes desire. You still want things. You still feel attraction, curiosity, interest. But those feelings don't hijack your behavior. You don't abandon your values for momentum. You don't overextend to secure closeness. You don't sacrifice self-respect for a momentary high. You stay aligned. And alignment is what creates quiet authority. People trust what is aligned because it doesn't contradict itself. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is learning to delay reaction, not as a tactic, but as a discipline. When an impulse rises, whether to speak, to act, to withdraw, to push, train yourself to wait. Count breaths. Feel the urge fully without moving. This is not suppression. This is strength training for the mind. Each time you do this, you're teaching yourself that you are larger than the impulse, that you don't have to obey every internal command. There is a stoic calm that comes from knowing you can handle yourself under pressure. Reminded himself, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. That idea applies inwardly too. The best response to impulsive emotion is not to mirror it, but to rise above it. When you stop being reactive, you stop being predictable. And unpredictability rooted in calm, not chaos, commands respect. Another practice is intentional restraint. Choose daily to not indulge a harmless impulse, not because it's bad, but because you're training sovereignty. Skip the immediate gratification. Sit with the urge. Let it pass. You'll notice something surprising. Urges crest and fall like waves. They feel permanent until you watch them closely. The moment you see that, their grip weakens. You realize you're not your impulses. You're the one observing them. Stoicism teaches that dignity comes from choice. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." Mastery over impulses is embodiment. You don't announce discipline. You demonstrate it through consistency, through the absence of desperation, through the presence of calm. People don't respect words nearly as much as they respect self-control they can feel. As you deepen this mastery, your energy changes. You become less volatile and more grounded, less eager and more intentional, less reactive and more deliberate. You're not trying to control dynamics anymore because you're not trying to escape discomfort. You can tolerate ambiguity. You can tolerate silence. You can tolerate not knowing where something is going. That tolerance reads as confidence because it is confidence. Confidence in your ability to remain whole regardless of outcome. This is why Stoic men don't chase influence. Influence follows them. not because they demand it, but because they don't need it. They are not ruled by impulses, and so they don't try to rule others. They lead by example, quietly. They show that self-mastery is the highest form of power available to a human being. Your work, then, is simple but demanding. Watch yourself. Catch the impulse before it escapes your body. Pause, breathe, choose, practice daily, not perfectly but consistently. Over time, this discipline becomes your baseline. You move slower but with more certainty. You speak less but with more weight. And without effort, without strategy, without force, respect begins to meet you where you stand. If you've stayed with me till now, understand this. Respect isn't something you chase, explain, or negotiate. It's something that naturally follows when you are anchored in yourself. Stoicism never promised approval. It promised freedom. And the moment you stop needing validation, the dynamic shifts, quietly, powerfully, permanently. These principles aren't tricks. They're not tactics. They're standards. When you embody them, you don't announce your value, you live it. Your calm becomes noticeable. Your restraint becomes attractive. Your silence begins to speak louder than words ever could. But here's the real question. Will you just consume this wisdom, or will you apply it? Because knowing these secrets changes nothing. Becoming them changes everything. So take one principle from this video, just one, and practice it relentlessly. Not to impress, not to prove, but to align with the strongest version of yourself. If this video gave you clarity, strength, or even discomfort, that's a sign you're growing. Like the video, subscribe for more Stoic wisdom and share this with someone who needs to reclaim their self-respect. Walk calmly, stand firmly, and remember, when you master yourself, respect follows without effort.